really do need their help, and it would be educated.
Only a man to go with?
No, I'm going to stand at the door in case I need to run. I'm going to let them go in first, and I'm going to stand at the door. Thank you, Mike. Okay, if the young people want to go, if the teachers want to have class, what do you want to do? All right, everybody going to stay here? All right, open your Bibles, 1 Timothy, chapter number 2, and we're going to look at the role of women in the church. I started to title this as I was studying it. I started to title it, A Woman's Place. But I've been around the block 1 or 2 times. And I started to say it like this with my arms folded. We're going to discuss tonight a woman's place. But that sounded chauvinistic. And can I tell you something truthfully? I've heard this passage dealt with by other groups and denominations. And some of them have mishandled this passage. Some of them have twisted the scripture in a way that it makes a woman feel like a second-class Christian to a man. And there is nothing in this chapter that does that if a person will thoroughly study. All right, with that said, I want us to look at a passage about the woman's role in the church, chapter number 2, verses 9 through 15 of 1 Timothy. And I want us to see a woman's role in the church. It will bless the ladies. It'll be very brief, but it's also got something in it, I believe, that will be a blessing for every one of us here tonight. Here's what the Bible reads, Paul writing to Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 2, I begin reading verse 9. In like manner also that women adorn themselves, that is what they wear, in modest apparel or clothing, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly array. Now right there, I've heard that explained as no one can wear any jewelry. But we'll look at that in just a minute. I'll show you what the text is saying. Verse 10, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the men, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith, in charity, and holiness, with sobriety. Now, look at verse 15. God's not saying, I'm letting a woman experience pain of childbearing so that I can teach her her place. That is not what he is saying. He is saying that the great role of women is giving birth to children, and it's really saving. He is really saying saving society, producing society. There was a small group up in New York in the 1800s called the Shakers, and they said that husbands and wives, no one can have sexual relationships, no one can have children. And what happened? Within 45 years, it died. Well, of course it died. Everybody died. And here's a passage, not saying that God is so stern of women, he's going to let them feel pain, and maybe that'll help them since poor Eve deluded Adam. No, that's not what the text is saying. It's saying that women have that special role of giving birth to children, which is, I understand, one of the greatest pains that anyone can feel in the human experience. And I've also heard that God does have a sense of humor, so he lets men have kidney stones. And I've had 2 or 3 of those. But it still doesn't compare with childbearing. But she saves society in that she's giving forth children, and what a sacrificial role. Now, the place of women in the church. First of all, understand that Jesus Christ came into a chauvinistic world. The New Testament world, the Old Testament world, and then as it came into the New Testament world, the biblical world, the ancient world, and it's what I should say, the ancient world, not the biblical world, because the ancient world was extremely chauvinistic. They were extremely male, put the emphasis and priority on gender being a male. It was all through ancient history, and even in the time when Jesus came into the world, society demeaned women. Women had few rights in society. And men had the majority of the rights. And a woman in many segments of society was considered the property of a man, like we would say, a man's lawnmower or the washing machine. But let me explain that when Jesus came into this world, he instantly elevated the place of womanhood. That's why he stopped purposely in Samaria. He went to a place that no Jew was to go to. The Samaritans had a history where the Jews looked down upon them. And for Jesus to get from Judea up to Caesarea, he had to go through Samaria. And Jews didn't go to Samaria. They went around Samaria to get to Caesarea, because the Assyrians had come in centuries before and had intermarried with these Jews. And so the Jews said, "Oh, you're just second class." And the Jews looked down on the Samaritans. So Jesus did this. When he came to the woman at the well, he first of all let people know that no one country is better than another. You to have national pride, which we're very proud to be Americans. But we can't say that we're better than anybody else. No country can say we're better than anybody because of a certain country we're in. And Jesus specifically went to Samaria to speak to a woman. And when he starts speaking to her at the well, she's instantly mortified. She says, "Jesus, what are you doing talking to me? I surmise that you are a man of great import, a man of significance, and don't you realize you can't be talking to me? Number one, I'm a Samaritan. Second, I'm a woman." Jesus went directly to that well to be able to let all women know, and it's recorded in John chapter 4, to let women know that he cares as much about them as he does a man. God is not a chauvinist, nor does he show partiality to one gender over another. What logic does it make for me to say, I'm a man, so I deserve more rights in society or in a church than a woman? Doesn't make any sense at all, does it? And there's some people who have twisted this passage to almost make women in church circles feel that they are subservient and second class. God chose in his loving providence a sweet little Jewish teenage girl named Mary to bring forth him into the world. And what did God speak to that little sweet Mary? He said, "Thou art highly favored." Highly favored. God chose Mary. And in doing so, Mary's position of servitude and submission to God also elevated womankind. Now understand, there are roles of headship and authority in the Bible. The headship, first of all, is that Jesus Christ is head over all of the world. He is over the church. He is over the church. Over all the churches, over all the world. Now, I have a ministry at St. Mark. I have absolutely no ministry, no authority at Swansonville Pentecostal Holiness Church. Mike Harp's a good friend of mine. He and I just bumped into each other Monday at a hospital, and we're able to chat for a while. He's a good friend, so I can use him for example. I couldn't go up to his church tonight and say, "Now, Mike, you just sit down right there. I've got a message that I can preach, and you're not going to preach to me." No, I can't do that. Neither can he come into my church and say, "Now, Jerry, you just sit down right there and I'll preach." Now, he's such a good preacher, I bet him. But he's not going to come in here and he's not going to say, "Now, Jerry, you can't preach. I'm a great preacher. I'm an evangelist all over the country." And you just said, "Why?" He can't do that. Why? Because this is not his station of authority. All right, now notice this. Also, Paul had already mentioned in another passage about a husband being in leadership of the home. But now let's go back and look at these three real quick, and I got to close. Jesus Christ is head of the universe, head of the world, head of the church, over all the churches, not just St. Mark, over all the churches. But we like that because of who he is over the churches. He says, Paul writes of Jesus, and he says, he, Jesus, so loved this world, so loved the church, that he died and gave himself for us. Now, do you have anybody that you know would die for you other than Jesus? I'll tell you, that's important. Now, we don't have many people in the world we'd die for. I don't, and you don't. I'd die for my spouse. I'd die for certain members of my family. And if I was in a situation some 30 years ago as a kid preacher where this lady's husband came into a Christmas banquet we were having, and he was very forceful with her and the children. He was going to literally throw them out of the fellowship hall. And I jumped in front of her, and so he grabbed me to throw me out of the fellowship hall. And that didn't work so well, not because I'm a he-man. I think God helped me, but I was able to subdue him. Now, when you think, and I didn't die for her, I kind of questioned that for a minute. He was pretty strong. When you think that Jesus is over the church, he has the authority, but he's also the one who loved me and you so much he died for us, we say, it's okay, Jesus, I'm glad to have him over the world and over the church. When you think of a pastor, and he's got leadership and teaching authority over the church, but as we studied this past Sunday, but when he serves in humility, you know that he loves you. And you know that he's not going to be walking around pointing his finger like a little CEO saying, you do this, you do that, and everybody must serve me or please me, or I'll go find somewhere else. I mean, that kind of leadership's nauseating. And you got a pastor who loves you, who will do anything in his power he can for you. You say, you know what? It's okay that he's got teaching authority of the church. All right. And in the home, or a husband, Paul calls it a headship. A leadership. But when the lady has a husband. And Paul said, he's going to be like Jesus if he's the right kind of husband. And she's not going to have any problem saying, we're going to serve together, and you have a leadership that's a little above me, but we're going to work together, and you're not going to ignore my voice. And you love me so much that you would die for me. I mean, what's there much to argue about? I mean, we still have disagreements. Yes, we do. But when you have that kind of leadership, that's the best kind of leadership. It's no one is subservient. There is submission only to Jesus. And there is a willingness to serve him and love him through the different auspices that he gives. God uses women. He always has. And to read this text, if you're not careful, there are two extremes that come out of this. A woman can't do anything in the church because she's a woman. Now, I've almost heard it put like that in different segments and in other denominations. Well, if you're not a man, you can't serve God in positions in the church. And a woman's place, she's got to stay quiet. All right, now let's compare that. Let me compare that, what's been written here, back with what God has done. God used a woman by the name of Deborah to stop the enemies of God, and she's recognized as one of the judges in the Old Testament, and judges carry great authority. God is not a chauvinist. The Bible is not gender emphatic over a man. When God, through Jesus and the power of the Holy Ghost, started the New Testament church, He uses Aquila and Priscilla, a husband and wife team, and there's no designation over which one of those was in the leadership of the church. They both co-served in the church. And God used Priscilla and Aquila equally. God needs women in churches. When Paul received the call to go to Macedonia, God called him, and he goes to a place in Macedonia, and there he meets a businesswoman by the name of Lydia. And ladies and gentlemen, if it had not been for Lydia, Paul would have not been able to be a blessing and found the church in Macedonia. God needs women. Now notice. The whole, the interpretations range from, if a woman's in a church, she can't do anything, she got to stay quiet, to that next part of the passage where it says a woman should not have the plaiting of the hair with gold, nor the wearing of gold. And some have taken that to mean you can't wear any kind of jewelry. All right, now let's look at that real quick. We're going to close. I grew up in a very strong holiness movement. But I appreciate my great church at Mayodan because they would talk about worldliness, but they never talked about excesses such as wearing jewelry. They never mentioned that. They just carried themselves in the way that this passage imitated and emulates and suggests that we imitate, and that is with modesty. And my church did that. But somehow I got in my mind, when I was a teenage boy, I read that passage and I understood it. I understood it to mean you could never wear gold. When Carolyn and I were about to get married, I told her she could not wear a wedding band. She said, Jerry, I want to wear a wedding band. I want the world to know I'm yours. I said, no, if we're going to really be holiness, you can't wear a wedding band. She said, okay. She said, it breaks my heart. I'll do it. And then my pastor, Dr. J.H. Burke, who became my mentor in ministry, he was counseling me, and before the marriage, he had a session with me, and I had told him, he talked about the wedding, and he said, then there'll be the exchange of the rings. And I said, oh, wait a minute, Brother Burke, we're not going to have rings. We're not going to wear rings. Now get this. Brother Burke never wore a wedding band because he came out in the 40s and 50s, in a time when holiness people didn't wear any kind of jewelry whatsoever. But you know what he told me? He said, Jerry, I don't think that's wise. I said, what do you mean, Brother Burke? And I glanced at his fingers and there was no wedding band. He said, I don't think that's wise. I don't think it's wise for you to tell Carolyn that she can't wear a wedding band, that you're not going to wear a wedding band. I said, well, Brother Burke, isn't that holiness? I was innocent, but I wanted to serve God and do the best I could. And I was innocent in that. And here's what he said. He says, Jerry, I'm not calling you into any specific work of the Lord. He said, but I want to tell you one day I believe God's going to call you into some kind of line of work for him specifically. And he said, I don't know what that is. He said, but God's got his hand on you, son. And he said, I want to tell you something. If God calls you to be a missionary and you go to any of the countries in South America and you don't wear a wedding band, they're going to look at you as a man who doesn't consider the vows to his wife sacred. I said, I did not know that. He said, Jerry, if you're going to be serious and you're going to follow God, you need to wear a wedding band. See, here was a man so wise that he came out of the sternness of the holiness movement, and yet he learned. He learned how to operate in interpreting the Holy Scripture of God. Then you know what I learned later?
when I was reading this passage, I learned just how wrong I was. Because if you interpret this passage to say you cannot wear any gold, you can't wear any jewelry, then you know what he's talking about? He's talking about apparel, jewelry, and clothes. Now let me tell you how ludicrous I was. And I didn't put it all together till years earlier. I mean years ago. And I'm ashamed it took me a number of years before I got there and started studying. Now here, I better say this softly. If you take this passage to mean that no one can wear any jewelry, well then you have to say on the same side of that, looking at the argument, then you're going to have to say nobody can wear any clothes. Now don't throw a songbook at me. What's he talking about? If you take this passage to mean you cannot wear jewelry, he's talking about wearing clothes and wearing jewelry. If you say you cannot wear any jewelry, then you should say also you can't wear any clothes. He's talking about the excessiveness. In the ancient world, the ladies had these... You remember back in the 60s, ladies would wear their hair up like Vestal Goodman. I love that. I kind of miss it, but Carolyn tells me, well, let's see you carry around that big bun like... But I kind of miss that. I love to watch the old videos of Vestal Goodman just because I like to see that. I was kind of born in that era and I like that. But the ladies in the ancient times of Paul, when he wrote this, they had their hair straight up like Vestal Goodman. And the more gold they put on it, the more attention they got. And that's what Paul was saying. Paul was not saying you can't wear any gold, you can't wear any kind of jewelry. He was saying that you're not pleasing God by how much you wear or how little you wear. And here's the key. Modest. 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 Now let's go to the passage of women in the church. It was a cultural setting where women were demeaned and they were considered, in some segments, not all segments, but in some segments, the property of a man. They were just building the New Testament church when this was written. And it can be taken to mean culture that Paul was bringing in slowly the role of womanhood in the church. Now let's look at it practically. And let's do it reverently before God Almighty and in respect to the Scripture. The majority of every church is made up of women. And if you ladies quit doing what you do at St. Mark, we men are going to be in trouble. We can't make it without you. God never intended for us to make it without you. So he gives this principle. He says, be modest, ladies. Now I can tell you, we men ought to be modest. We men ought to be modest as well. Then he says, be moral, ladies. Represent morality. We men, too, need to represent morality. And then he says, ladies, be of industry. That is, be of means. That's how Lydia helped Paul start the church. She had the means to do it. She worked. She did something. And Paul is here saying, do something. Be someone who can produce something. Whether you're working in the home or outside the home, be able to produce something. So here are three quick principles. Number one, for women to be submissive to God and surrender to their lives to Him. Whenever you find a woman who truly has surrendered her life to God, that lady carries with her, I think a surrender to God is one of the most beautiful aspects to a woman's countenance. It's a loveliness and a grace and a charm that can't be reduplicated in any other way. We men, we need to surrender to God. We need to surrender to God. Secondly is service. Ladies, thank God for your willingness to serve and to serve in Sunday school, to serve on Wednesday night, and to teach. And when it says here, not to teach over men, that can be easily translated rather than saying, some men, some churches, some denominations say, I see that. No woman can ever teach, no woman can ever speak in our church. No woman. But the language here where he says teach over can well mean, even in this day where there were male chauvinists and women had very few rights, can well mean not to do it in an arrogant attitude and to elbow a man out of the way. Now, if a woman shouldn't elbow a man out of the way, a man shouldn't elbow a woman out of the way. So we want to be careful with the text. We want to be careful with the text. And then lastly, there's a surrender, there is a submission, there is a service, and then there is a symbolism and a sign. Ladies, you are a sign to this world of what God does when you invite Him into your life. Your picture of womanhood is such a blessing to this world, and this world needs that kind of sign and picture of what a lady is with God's presence in her life. A woman who carries herself in that humility and in that grace and in that charm. It just is a refreshing eye catcher. That something about a woman can be more attractive than even a man who is surrendered. Ladies, I want to tell you you're special to God. I want to tell you you're special to this church. I want you to know God needs you in this church. You're not a second-class Christian. You're not somebody for us to just say, all right, we'll use you here and we'll use you there, but, you forget anything else if it's really important. This church wouldn't make it. We would have to fold our tent, padlock our doors, and sell the property if we didn't have you women here working and serving and loving God. The role of a woman in the church. You set an example that we are glad to follow. And I want to tell you as your pastor, ladies, I love you. I salute you. I thank God for you. And behind every good man, there's a great woman. A great woman. Stand with me, please. Holy Father, bless our women. Thank you for them. Guide them. Keep them. And I pray, dear God, that you will bless our ladies of St. Mark and our young girls that are one day going to become young ladies. And bless all of our young ladies as we're all maturing and serving you. Thank you that they are symbols of your righteousness. They are representatives of your grace. And they have a charm, dear God, that's so attractive. Bless the ladies of this church. We honor you for every woman in our church. And we thank you for them in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. See, that didn't split the church, did it? God bless you. See you Sunday morning.